Welcome to the Women Who podcast. And so I hope you all had a very great week. We're here and we're back with another interview with a special guest, someone that I got to know while she was preaching at a church in Miami. And we've communicated through Instagram, and I'm actually very excited to interview her. Her name is Angie. You've probably seen her around if you go to our church. She's been there for a long time. And so I can't wait to have a conversation with her. So let me introduce you to her, and let's get started on this conversation.
Yay. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. We're really excited to jump in on your story. You have a really unique story. I think we'll start with where it all began, which is your first career path and how you got there, and then we'll maneuver from there.
Yeah, awesome. So I graduated with my bachelor's degree from Miami-Dade College in 2021. And I was a very diehard criminal justice girl. I came from sort of a background of law enforcement. My mom was a private investigator. My uncle is a brigadier general in the Army. And so I felt like that was kind of what I knew growing up. And I really had a passion for justice. I felt like I was a very justice-oriented girl. And I had really cool experiences. I got to intern with Homeland Security back in 2020 for 6 months with their child exploitation unit. So I loved every second of it.
Beautiful, beautiful. So what would you say was your reason why you felt like that was the path for you? Were you trying to follow in footsteps of somebody and you felt like that was the way, or was it speaking to your soul at that point in your life, or how would you go about saying that?
Yeah, I think I pursued criminal justice for a few different reasons. I felt like the main one was because it was all I really knew at the moment. I feel like society kind of pins this idea on us that, you know, by the time you're 18, you need to have your entire life path figured out.
Right.
And, you know, you need to know where you're going to go to school, what you want to study, and do that for the rest of your life.
Yep.
And so when I looked at my options, I was like, well, criminal justice is all I kind of know.
Right.
I always felt like I would be a good investigator because I'm very observant, very detail oriented. So I was like, well, this is the only path that makes sense for me. And I didn't really volunteer much when I was in high school. I only volunteered at the hospital and medical at the time when I was like 15. So I was like, okay, criminal justice really sounds like the only option for me.
Right.
So that's why I pursued it at the time.
That makes total sense.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. All right. So you spoke a little bit about with your 18-year-old self. Before we dive into that question, which I have for you, go ahead and give us an idea of what you moved into, because it's a really unique career choice, a path that maybe was not one that you would think to go from criminal justice to what you ended up in. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So I find myself now in criminal justice. Sorry. So I find myself now in interior design. That's what I switched over to from criminal justice. And it was definitely a really major leap. When I was working for a nonprofit right after I had graduated college, I found myself actually designing my own office space a lot of the time. And then I was asked by a coworker of mine if I could also design her office space. And so I found myself at the time during work hours, constantly on Pinterest, scrolling, trying to design my space over and over again. And I was like, okay, it's taking up so much of my thoughts. It's all I think about from when I wake up until I go to sleep. Like I would just walk into a room and I would be like, how can I make this look better?
Yep.
I always wanted to change the aesthetic, the flow, the furniture layouts. And I was like, okay, if this is what I'm thinking about all the time, I think I need to enter this creative space.
Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, as a creative myself, and I think we discussed this off the mic, that was the field that I originally had envisioned for myself. So I resonate so deeply with that sentiment of like it being so passion forward.
Yeah.
And always wanting to make a room beautiful, really.
Yes.
And I think that's, again, so telling of who you are, because it went from, you know, I think the criminal stance was one that you were shown, you know, and now it was listening to that inner voice, that inner joy, even what brings you joy. And so did you ever feel like maybe there was a moment where you were going to disappoint your parents, or was that a conflict of interest even? Talk a little bit about that. I also know that in this span of your career change, you had been married now.
Yeah.
And then discuss a little bit about the support system with that and what that looks like. So both directions we're so curious about.
Yes. So for sure, I'll start with my mom because she has been such a pillar in my life. Like every decision that I've made career-wise, when, you know, I told her I was going to pursue criminal justice, she was all for it. And then back in 2022, when I told her, I think I'm going to leave this career and try to find what it is that I like, my mom was like, you know what? Life is so short. You cannot spend this one life working something that you don't love, that you're not passionate about. Right. And so her support made it that much easier for me to just take that leap and be like, okay, I'm going to start exploring my options. And then on the other side, my incredible husband at the time saw the toxic work environment that I was in. He saw how much I was just loving design on Pinterest all the time. And so I remember coming up to him, and I'll never forget, I was like, I think I want to leave my job. I'll still look for criminal justice. You know, I was just trying to play it safe. Right. I was like testing my limits to see like, okay, what would he think about this? So I was like, okay, you know, I think I'm just going to leave this and maybe try to find something different. And he was like, I'm going to hold it down. I'm going to pay all the bills. Just take your time and find what it is that you like. Find yourself. Yeah. Because beautiful. Yeah, my husband knows my childhood story that I could never really find myself. I couldn't really explore a lot of creative things. I was a competitive dancer growing up all my life, but I felt like that was all I was able to explore. I was never able to really redesign my room or do certain things. All I ever knew was dance growing up. And so it was almost like my husband allowed me to become that little girl again and just allot me that time and space to just be like, try out hobbies, try out different things, apply for jobs. If it doesn't work out, quit, get the next one until you find what it is. Wow. Although he told me from the jump, I think you should work at an interior design firm. And I would shut it down all the time because I was like, no, who's going to take me? I don't have the credentials.
I love that you're talking about your husband like this because I think we're all single, right? On the Women Who podcast. But one of the things that it reminds me of is that your partner can be your biggest blessing or your biggest curse, right? And in his case, he ended up just being that person that was like, I'm going to help you heal and find, like, so that you can find your identity and who you are and who, like, what really makes you happy. And then he just gave you that space that maybe a parent doesn't even give you. He gave it to you. So in that process, he helped you heal a part of you.
And it's so funny that you bring that up because my therapist just helped me uncover this last week in our session. So it's just funny how the Holy Spirit is just working in this and just reaffirming that, because my therapist broke that down for me last week. And she was like, I'm so thankful that your husband was able to allow you to become a little girl again. And explore these areas that you weren't allowed to. He's healed so many parts of my heart. And I tell him all the time, like, there's not 1 ounce of pride or like resistance of me saying that. I'm like, Raul has changed my life and has given me so much space to just explore. And that's why I'm here. And I found my passion because of that.
That's amazing. Would you say that your journey and where you stand today would be making that little girl proud now?
Oh my gosh. Yes. It makes me so emotional to even think about it. I feel like my little girl would almost look at me and be like, I can't believe that we're here or that we've made it here because I don't even think that she knew what she wanted. I think all she could think of was, you know, the love of her parents, because that's really all a little kid can grasp, you know? But I think that she would look at me now and be like, you're so brave. You're so brave. The fact that you've tried over and over again in order to find ourselves, because she comes along with me in every phase, every journey. Like, I posted something on Instagram, I think it was last week, and it was the last post on my slide, and it said, she's with me everywhere I go. And it's like your little girl self. And I think that more than anything, I just feel like she's just grateful that she gets to come along and be on this like journey and feel like I'm the most authentic version of myself.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Go ahead.
Dang, yeah. I'm like sitting here processing what you're saying, because I think that that's something that we've been trying to explore, right? Going back to the inner child in us and the wounds that we carry and the wounds that we don't even know, and how to uncover them, unpack them, and how to heal them. Because that sometimes is the hardest part, and the part that a lot of people want to numb. So I want to talk about the healing process that you went through. I know that you talk about Hope for Life. Like
Yes.
we've talked about it off the mic. We've talked about it on Instagram. You actually recommended them to me, and I started following them on social media, and I told the girls we should go and check it out. So can you talk a little bit about that healing journey? What maybe the things that you felt that you needed to heal from, those inner child wounds that maybe you felt came up that you needed to kind of process and go through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I found Hope for Life back in 2021, but it wasn't until probably April of 2022 that I started committing and going there like full time. They have, their support groups on Thursdays, their life classes on Saturdays. So I just felt like I was ingesting so much information. And I think Hope for Life, more than anything, really showed me like my father wounds and a lot of my church traumas and my church hurts, and kind of like a ball of yarn, right? Like untangling so many layers that you don't even think are intertwined, but they are. Right. Everything is cohesive and goes together. But I think one of the biggest factors that Hope for Life helped me uncover at the time was when I was still in my criminal justice job. I remember feeling such a disconnect. And at the time, I was actually applying with Homeland Security to become a criminal investigator. So my life path was already like I was getting ready to take the polygraph test. By the time I'll never forget, I walked through Hope for Life stores and I was literally like taking my polygraph test the next week.
Wow.
So just the way that the timing of everything happening. And I just remember being so dissatisfied, like, why am I not excited for this? I studied this. This is my career path. I graduated. Homeland Security was always the plan.
Yeah.
I had the most amazing supervisor when I interned there, and he was the one getting me my foot in the door. So I remember they had told me, you're going to have to relocate to Puerto Rico. And I was like, what do you mean I have to relocate to Puerto Rico? Like, I just got married. Like, this can't be. Like, we were not ready to move at all. I was prepared to move to another state, but not to another country at the time.
Yeah.
And so I was working and navigating through a lot of feelings, and Hope for Life was the first place that made me realize that maybe I pursued criminal justice out of my little girl's wounds and wanting to be a voice and justice oriented for other little kids. Cause I was going into child exploitation.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe that was a consideration, that it wasn't really Angie's passions and Angie's desires, but more so rescuing her little girl.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that as an adult, I can rescue, like, obviously God is the one that rescues us, but you play that part too in aiding and helping yourself. And so when Hope for Life helped me uncover that, it was like my life went like this. Although the healing journey is not linear,
Right.
it felt like this on the way to becoming more authentic to myself and being like, who am I?
Yeah.
What is it that I actually like?
Right.
You know, like, is this for little Angie? Is this for me?
Yeah.
Like, so many enmeshments. So Hope for Life was able to help me uncover so much of that.
Yeah. How old were you when you got married, Angie?
24.
And Raul?
24. We're same age.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great because I'm like, obviously we're all in our 30s. And I think sometimes we're like, dang, where are the people that are just like the men that are going to help us in this healing process on this journey and stuff. And to hear that a 24-year-old, has her head on her neck and on her shoulders so well put. And she just had to find that area that she knew she needed to heal. And it's hard because you sit in that tension, right? You sit in the tension of these are the plans that I saw for my life, but this is not what's bringing me fulfillment.
Right.
So how do I go from that to now the unknown? And how do I find what it is that's really going to fuel that fire in me? And that's a conversation that I even had on my podcast in like when we were talking about me transitioning over to ministry and stuff, that I was saying, like, I went through all of these career paths. Like, I studied meteorology and all this stuff. And I was just like, man, this is not what is feeling like success to me. Like, this doesn't scream success to me. I'm making good money, but I'm not feeling fulfilled. And so it's a matter of like, what is that thing that's going to really set your soul on fire?
Yes.
And so I love the fact that you correlated everything together, the criminal justice, the Hope for Life and your healing, and then the interior design is kind of the result of you walking in that process that a lot of people try to ignore.
Yes.
So yeah, I love that you're speaking on all of this. Going back to the church, do you think that there was a part in the church hurt that you had that made you realize that you really had to take care of things within you to heal? Like, how did that play a role in the healing process as well?
Yeah. I think a lot of my life and my trauma, my childhood was always adopting other people's stories for my life.
Okay.
That's something that my therapist in Hope for Life has been able to really help me uncover. Like, one of my core emotional wounds and core emotional learning was always taking on whatever somebody told me about me was going to be my story, or whoever somebody else's identity was, I was going to take that on because who am I? Who was I as a little girl? I know that this is a little bit vulnerable, but, you know, growing up, my father kept me a secret from his side of the family. And so when you learn at a very ripe age of 4 years old, such a vulnerable age, and that's when you start to make connections in your brain. That's when, you know, you start to formulate memories and different things like that. I feel like when you learn that at such a young age, it almost forces you to grow up. You're like, your brain is just starting to make these new wave paths, and you're like, okay, this is a lot of information to process. And so I felt like that was just a majority of my childhood, just grasping other people's identities.
Yeah.
And so in church, if somebody told me who I was, if somebody told me what to do, I would just take that on. I would just do that because I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
I just do whatever somebody tells me to do, or I just become whoever somebody wants me to become.
Right.
So if my mom told me to pursue a certain path, or my father, I would be like, okay, I guess, because this is what other people want for me.
Yeah.
But I could never take the time to get to know what Angie wants or who Angie is, because that was robbed of me from such a young age. So I feel like the healing journey almost allowed me this space, like a playground. That's how I see it. I feel like the healing journey has been a playground for me with different areas, like little monkey bars here, a little slide over here. And it's like, okay, go explore this corner over here. Oh, you don't like that? Okay, now go over here. Like it felt like I had to grow up all over again.
Yeah.
Become a child again at 4 years old and repair that time of my life, and then go back into the teenager phase, then go into the adult phase as layers until finally I'm like, okay, I have not arrived. I don't think healing is about arriving. It's the journey, it's not about the destination, but I feel like I'm like more settled in who I am, and the healing journey has played such a wonderful part in that.
Yeah.
I love that you gave yourself permission,
Yeah.
you know, to not have it all figured out. Admit that to yourself and then move it forward.
Right.
So I think we all have chosen one career path and then shifted and pivoted to another,
Yes.
myself included.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for that, because I think our audience needs to know that it is okay. So what advice would you give to maybe an 18, 19, 20-year-old who is probably struggling with the same thing of like not knowing necessarily who they are and what their career choice needs to really be, and that weight? I think we've all felt that weight before. Would you give them any advice now where you stand today?
Oh my gosh. Yes. I think the first thing I would say is you don't have to have your life figured out at 18. There's no such thing.
Right.
There's no such thing. Like, our frontal lobe does not develop until we're like 25. So I'm like, there's 18-year-olds that know what they want and they go after it, and it's admirable. And there's others like me who I would tell them it is okay. There's no pressure. There's people who literally, I've seen photos of 70-year-olds who are getting their degrees in college, 40-year-olds who are going to law school because they've realized at 40, I want to be a lawyer. This is my passion.
Right.
So there's no timeline. I think that's what I would tell them, that time is a construct and your journey is in God's hands, and God already has your story written out.
Yeah.
Everybody's timeline is different. So I think that would be
Beautifully
some
said.
advice that I would give to me.
Beautifully said. How has your faith journey helped you navigate to make this identity like yours? How to like find yourself in this? And
Well, I also want to know, coming from criminal justice to a creative industry now, creatives tend to be so hard on themselves in regards to their imposter syndrome, right? We don't think that we're good enough. We don't think that we're as good as other people, especially like you said, when you don't feel like you have a degree and you're just like, I don't even know what I'm doing. How do you navigate that as well?
right.
Oh my gosh. Well, I will say that what's beautiful about going from criminal justice to a creative field is that in both fields, you have to be a really observant person. And so I feel like I carry a lot of, I guess, perfectionism tendencies, which I'm currently healing and trying to work on because it can be destructive in its own ways. But I feel like it actually helped me because in criminal justice, especially interning with Homeland Security, I was able to work a cold case. And you have to be the most detailed, observant human, like can't take your eyes off of anything. You can't miss any details. And so going into the creative field, I feel like I was able to take that gift and apply it to design and be like, okay, I can do the same thing that I applied in criminal justice, my detailed self, my, my observant self, and kind of just put all of that together into the designs that I create.
Wow.
As far as imposter syndrome, it is a real thing. And I feel that on an everyday basis.
Yeah.
I work for Mayra Perez now, and her company is called Mayra Perez Designs. She is an incredible human and took me in with no experience, no degree, literally just the chemistry that her and I share and the way that we work together. And she has invested so much into me already.
Yeah.
And just her being able to take that chance and somebody who's able to believe in you when you don't even have anything to show forth yet, I think has given me the confidence through the imposter syndrome to just go every day and be like, okay, this woman believes in me.
Yeah.
Somebody believes in me. She sees a vision.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I think that's what what plays a major role
Right.
in you being able to switch from one thing to the next, right?
Yes.
It's finding those people that believe in you
Yes.
when you don't even believe in yourself, or that believe in you in those areas that you're just like, but am I actually really called to do this? And am I really good enough to do this?
Right.
So the fact that you found yourself, how did you find her? How did you come about finding her?
So my husband had been encouraging me, for months. Again, you need to work for an interior design firm. You need to go to a boutique. And again, I would shut him down and be like, I don't have the credentials. This is crazy. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm just going to apply and see. So I had found her on a website. I don't remember where I applied through, one of those, like either ZipRecruiter, Indeed. And I found her. And what's funny is that I was really specific with God when I prayed, because I always told myself, I don't want to work at an interior design firm. It's going to be too cold. I remember you sharing that with me,
Right.
that the way that you were treated and everything, you just kind of lost your love for it. So I always told God, I don't want to work for a firm. There's something that feels cold about it. I want to work for one person at an interior design boutique.
Wow.
And Mayra is literally a one-man band. Like, it's literally just her. She has an interior design boutique in Doral. And I applied and I was like, okay, God, I'm just going to leave it on the table. She literally reached out to me that same night.
Wow.
And we got to talking and we had an interview. And what's funny about it is that she actually ended up going with somebody else. At first, she told me, Angie, it was so awesome to meet you. I had to go through with somebody else who has Revit experience, AutoCAD. And I told her, it was so awesome to talk to you. Like, don't even worry about it. I knew in my heart that she was going to need somebody with experience. Any interior designer does.
Yeah.
And so I remember telling Raul, I was like, babe, she said that she had to hire somebody else. Raul goes, no. She's going to call you.
Oh, wow.
I was like, no, she's not. She literally has somebody who can do all of her 3D programs. Raul was like, okay, love, don't worry. She's going to call you. The next day she texted me and she goes, hi, Angie. I was like, hey. And she was like, how have your other interviews been going? And I was like, yeah, they're okay. She was like, okay, I want you on my team. Right then and there. And I told her, what happened with the lady that you hired? And she was like, even though that she has the experience, it's not the connection nor the personality. And she was like, I'm willing to mentor you, train you, because I know you want this. And I feel like we'll work really well together. And I've been with her ever since.
I just got chills. Because it goes back to what's meant for you is gonna be for you no matter what. And it's so crazy how our God works, because I wanted to ask you as you were talking, what was on your resume to even get somebody who's an interior designer to even look, because there's been moments that I've applied to jobs where I'm like, I have all the and they're like, oh no, it's because of one keyword that we didn't pick up on it. So I'm like, how do you go from criminal justice to interior design? Like, what was on your resume?
Well, funny enough, I feel like I've lived so many lives in this one lifetime. So while I was in college, I always worked in construction as an administrative assistant. I had met this woman, funny enough. I have like so so much lore. I met this woman at a Pincho factory one day when I was in school, and she was like, "Oh, what do you do for work?" And I was like, "Nothing, I'm a student." And she was like, "Do you want to work for me?" And I have all these stories. I was like, "Okay, what do you do?" And she's like, "I'm a general contractor." And at the time I was like, that is so cool because she's a woman, and women in the construction industry to me is like amazing.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay. And I was her administrative assistant for 3 years. So I worked for her. And then during my break from criminal justice until now in interior design, I had kept going back to construction, just doing administrative assistant jobs, but obviously, pulling permits, working with the city, different stuff like that. So I felt like I was able to take that sort of experience because obviously in interior design, you're working a lot with construction. So I felt like I had to like butter up my resume and put as much as I could in there. But at the same time, I was like, I could show her a few mood boards, but there was no interior design that I could show her. So it was solely like, God, if this is meant to be, you will open the doors. And I just keep thinking of the scripture, like what door he opens, no man can shut. Like what's meant for you will stick around and it'll find you in due time.
That's crazy. Your husband's a general contractor too, right?
So he's a project manager currently, but he's studying to become a general contractor. Okay. So we're on like our Joanne and Chip vibes right now.
I love that.
Right.
Every girl's dream.
Right. Literally.
That's awesome.
So can we actually go backwards a little bit and talk a little bit about you and Raul and your marriage and stuff?
Yes.
Because we were talking about things. Britt asked you a question that I think is spectacular, especially in regards to daddy issues. Because I think sometimes women believe that, and we've talked about daddy issues. Like Britt has an episode coming up that probably at the time that we launch this episode, it's already going to be up, and where she talks about her dad. I've spoken about my dad. It's something that we've all had to navigate in regards to daddy issues. But I think sometimes women are so closed off on dating because they're like, I'm still navigating and healing from daddy issues, right? And so I love what you said in regards to how Raul helped you and all of that. Can you speak a little bit more on that and how you don't have to be fully healed from daddy issues to allow the right man into your life and how he pursued you too?
Yeah, absolutely. So Raul and I had met in VU back in 2016. So we met at church and it was always very friendly. I would say that I had a crush on him all 3 years that I was at VU. But yeah, we had met, we had developed a friendship. But there was never any like flirting there. It was just, he was very respectful towards me. And at the time I had gotten out of a relationship back in 2019. And I remember feeling like Raul was starting to pursue me. He was making hints, that he liked me. He would call me on the phone and I was like, okay, this is not like friend behavior. Like I could tell that there was something there. I actually had a dream back in 2019. We were talking about dreams. I have a lot of them. I had a dream, funny enough, with Justiny, Andrew Kalor's wife, that she came up to me at a party and she was like, why aren't you and Raul married yet? And I was like, what are you talking about? And she gets up and she leaves. And I was just sitting there on a couch, like it almost felt like, what, like, why are you wasting your time? What are you doing?
Yeah.
And so I remember I was too shy to tell Raul. So I told his best friend and I was like, tell Raul that I had this dream. And then his best friend tells him. And then Raul calls me and he was like, I was told that you had a dream. And I was like, no, like just like retracting because I got really scared. I was like, no, I didn't have a dream. I don't know what you're talking about. So finally, I think it was August 12th. We had sat down at a Chick-fil-A and Raul and I were having a conversation and I kind of told him, I was like, listen, I used to have a crush on you. I was trying to like slide it in, but just in case, like protect my heart. I was like, I used to have a crush on you, but like I really, really like our friendship. And I just was telling him how grateful I am for him. And right there, he grabs my hand. He's like, Angie, I'm in love with you. I've been in love with you all these years. I've been trying to confess to you. And I was like, okay. So from then on, Raul actually made a bunch of different like life decisions right there in that moment. He was actually producing music before he got into construction. And so he was like, I'm going to leave the music production life. I'm going to pursue construction with my dad. I'm going to get my life together because this has to work. And I was like on my seat, like in shambles, like you're making all these life decisions and you just told me that you love me,
Yeah.
So I feel like that even Raul just choosing to do that, make life decisions for this girl who's sitting right in front of him. I couldn't even get a word out. And he was already panning out his life in order to make things work. that already started healing my heart.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with a really independent mom that was like, I don't need no man. My mom was the type that could fix anything around the house. We couldn't even obviously afford at the time, like a contractor to come into the house and fix anything. So my mom was like a self-made, like I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know? And so when Raul came in and started making all these plans and was like, okay, and I'm going to do this for our future and this, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Slow down. I don't know if I'm on the same page as you. And he's like, I'll wait for you to catch up, but we're going to be there. And I was like, okay, you know? And so he was really, really patient with me. Like, he is gifted with patience, because for months I was just trying to scare him away. I was like, this is going to be my life. You don't want to be with me because of this reason. I have these issues, my family, my upbringing with my dad. And he was like, that doesn't scare me. He's like, look at my family, look at my life. He's like, I'm not looking for perfect, you know? So he has healed so many parts of my heart.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been binge watching Nobody Wants This.
Oh my gosh, me too.
So I think it reminds me so much of like how Adam Brody it doesn't matter what she says, he's like, I'm still here.
Yes.
Like, I don't care.
Right.
Again, what's for you is for you. It doesn't matter if you try to shut the door on it. It'll just be there for you.
And it's not a fairy tale either. That's what I tell my girlfriends all the time. I'm like, it's real life.
Yeah.
These men exist.
Yeah.
In Miami, they're a little more scarce, but they exist, and I know it, you know? So
yeah.
I love it.
I love that you mentioned the whole thing about your mom being hyper independent.
Yeah.
Because I think that that's something that we're all seeing in our society, right? Like so many women that are so hyper independent.
Yes.
How did that not trickle down to you, or did it? And were you able to like lean back into your femininity? Like, because I think that's something that we've talked about before in regards to masculinity and femininity and all of that. So.
Right. I think in some ways my mom's hyper independence did trickle down into me because I was so used to not having a dad around already and not having a man around, that my mom just always taught me how to figure things out. But I think deep down, the true femininity of just being relaxed and letting a man do the masculine things, whether it be around the house or just in general, was always there. It just needed to take the right person to bring it back out, because I think in every woman it's there.
Yeah.
She just needs a healthy man who can assure her in order for her to relax and just let it all be.
Right.
So when Raul came into my life, especially when we got married, because we had waited until we got married to move in together. So I feel like even that's when I started more like tapping into my femininity, because when you're dating and you're just going to each other's parents' houses, it's one thing, but starting to, you know, get married and live together, seeing him take care of things around the house, seeing him tell me like, no, what are you doing? I'm going to do that. This is my responsibility. This is not your responsibility. Even in my ways of trying to take over. And he would be like, you don't have to repeat your mom's patterns. You know, like you don't have to sit in your mom's behaviors or patterns.
Yeah.
That's when I started like really becoming self-aware and being like, oh, this doesn't belong to me.
Yeah.
Like just because it trickled down doesn't mean that it has to stay with me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
She's producing today, but I have to say, I need to chime in because I think it's so beautiful that your husband, I have small ears, didn't fault you, didn't blame you, just gave you a choice. And I feel like so many men don't. They're like, oh, she has daddy issues, or oh, she's hyper independent.
Right.
Okay, she's not for me. But
Right.
he gave you that choice, and he gave you that space to make the decision of, do I want to follow my family's patterns, or do I want to make my own?
Right. Yes. It's, I think of him and I'm like, I can't believe he's real.
Does he
Yeah.
have brothers? Older
Unfortunately, just sisters, which I love. Not unfortunate that he has it, but like I wish that he had brothers so I could disperse them everywhere. I'm like, go. There's 5 girls that I need to multiply. That is so funny.
I love that. What is his family dynamic like? Because I'm curious to know how he was developed to be the man. I mean, besides God, right? We
Right.
obviously know he is a Christian
Right.
man of God. But does he have like a healthy family dynamic too that raised him to think this way as well?
Yeah. So I love his family so much. His family's from Venezuela, and they brought over Raul and his siblings when he was 5. So Raul's like the middle child. And when they came over from Venezuela, you know, obviously his dad came over and just had to make a life for them because they were escaping everything that was going on. But I would say that Raul's manhood and his like beautiful masculinity truly comes from his dad, because he had a very emotionally available dad growing up. Extremely emotionally available, both mom and dad. And I think that that's such a gift that it's so rare. Like, I don't know, I don't have one friend or like that I know that has said, oh, both my parents have been emotionally available for me growing up. I mean, such an affectionate dad. Like, Raul's dad sees him and he cries. Like, I'll be at their house and I'll see his dad sitting, staring at Raul and being like this, crying, just looking at his son, because he's literally in love with Raul, and like sends him voice notes all the time. You are my pride and joy. I'm so proud of the man that you are. I mean, when you have a father that is constantly
Speaking life.
affirming you, speaking life, no matter what Raul does. I mean, when he was producing music, Raul would just, his dad would be like, I love you. I'm so proud of you. Anything.
Yeah.
So I think that obviously trickled into him and stayed with him. The affection, the words of affirmation, his dad giving him so much space to just be and explore. Because Raul and I have a very similar story, except he explored when he was a little bit younger. You know, he explored music production. Then he worked at a warehouse a little bit. Then he explored a little bit of project management, but more with real estate. And then finally he was like, you know what, I'm going to do construction with my dad. And then now he works for another construction company. But even his parents allowing him all that space, I think just trickles down then into his relationship and his marriage with me. And now he can give me that space because his cup has been so filled by his parents all his life that it's like he has all of this to just give into a cup that was not so full at the time, but I feel like I'm overflowing now because of what he's given me.
And you can tell.
Yeah.
You can tell that you are, which
Thank you.
I love talking to you. I mean, like I said, we've talked literally through social media.
Right.
And I love that we're able to actually sit down in person and have these conversations now.
Yeah.
Because I do think that they're healing.
Yes.
You know, I asked you to come on the podcast because obviously Britt went to school for interior design, and it's something I keep speaking life into. I think we all do, and we're just like, Britt, you like need to explore it a little bit more. Just because you had this really bad experience with this one like, firm that you worked in doesn't mean that maybe it's not something that would really like ignite that fire back up if you actually tried it, right? And so we've been trying to speak into that. She has the whole like category of what is it, home and lifestyle on Women Who. She's the one responsible for it. I'm more responsible for the relationship. So I was like, Angie's the perfect person for both of these things, because I've seen your relationship blossom and become what it is now. And I'm like, it's beautiful. When we've talked about the little healing journey that you've gone through, you know, we've been able to explore that as well. So I love that you've been able to tap into all of this, and I really do hope that it brings healing to a lot of girls' lives, that they realize that they don't have to fully heal to let love in, and that they can switch careers and find a calling and a passion for something else.
Yes. And I would just like to note that whoever hears this and might hear like, oh, well, you know, her husband gave her this space, like that's not my situation, or that's not my current like story. Like, how can this be for me? I think that it can happen for anybody as long as you're just honest with yourself and God with, you know, are you happy with your career?
Right.
Are you happy with where you are at in life? And if you're not, bring it to God, pray about it, and ask him to open doors. Because I would have done that regardless if I was married to Raul or not. At some point I would have realized that I'm not happy. Yeah. You know? So just because my husband gave me that space doesn't mean that has to be the same story for somebody else. Absolutely. You can still make a career change, switch your career path. Just my advice would be honest with yourself, be honest with God, and ask him to open doors, because he will do things that you cannot do for yourself. And I've seen it time and time again in my own life. Yeah. Yeah.
I love that. Anything else, Britt?
No, I think, I mean, you really you've ministered to me. So thank you so much for being on this podcast today, because I think it's going to help so many people on all paths of life. You're filled us with hope and direction and great advice. So thank you for sharing today, honestly.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm like, it's such an honor, and it gives me chills to just be like, you know, you want me to share my little story, you know, and I'm just so grateful that whoever listens to it, whether it be one person, whether it be a few more, 100 people, doesn't matter. But just the fact that you have women on here that can impact and share their testimonies. I think you guys are doing such a huge community to your service. And I just want to thank you guys and honor Women Who Miami. I want to honor all of you for a second and just say that what you're doing is life-changing, incredible for women, and more of the world needs what you guys are doing. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you for watching this episode with Angie. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed having that conversation with her. And so just like, subscribe, and do all the things that you do when you follow a podcast. And so we'll be back next week.